We'll continue to talk as we go forward about how each aspect of Angular works to satisfy the goals of an MVC framework. But for now, let's take a quick overview of what the various pieces of Angular are and how they often work together, and then we'll dive into each more deeply in the upcoming stages. The four main elements of Angular we're going to cover here are directives, factories, controllers, and filters. First off, let's talk about directives. We've already touched on these a couple different moments in our earlier videos, but now let's put forth a more formal definition. Directives are the fundamental building block of Angular. They essentially serve as the definitions for various declarations you want to use within your Angular application. These could range from a module that says, make this input field a date picker, to build an entire contact info card out of the data for this person object. As we saw earlier, they form the connection between the attribute that you attach to a DOM element and the JavaScript code that turns that attribute into actual functionality. Again, via the scope object that's scoped to a specific instance. They're extremely flexible, but fundamentally they work to embody a specific instance of data being rendered within the view, or the reverse of translating a user's input at the view layer back into the appropriate data structures. Additionally, directives are intended to be packaged as small modules that can be dropped in and just work, and even sometimes be combined with other directives on the same element. In contrast, Angular's factories are used to maintain one single instance of something. They are often used for maintaining state, such as the single user object that you want various directives to be able to interface with. Additionally, they can be used to provide an abstraction layer between your directives and your APIs, making many of those connections more flexible and modular. Rarely, if ever, will your user interface with a service directly, but instead those services will be dependencies of your directives and controllers, which we'll get to in a moment. Our next element for consideration is the controller. Controllers have a lot of similar functionality to directives, in that they provide a scope for us to connect data and a view, but they're predominantly used just for data connections and the logical restraints around them. Unlike a directive, they can't contain any extra templating or complex ordering, so you most commonly see them used as the logical parent for a specific page or view that collects all the necessary data, whereas the directives are the individual models and pieces that actually make up that view. And finally, Angular provides us with filters to implement temporary transformations of the data as it travels between the model and the view. For example, you might have an uppercase filter that transforms all the text into capital letters. With a filter, however, the data value itself would still remain in its original casing. Only the representation of the data in the view would be all uppercase. Likewise, some common filters are used for ordering or limiting arrays before piping them into an ng repeat, and again, the original array itself remains unchanged. Just the display in this particular instance is limited or ordered. That's a quick overview of the main elements of the Angular framework and some brief examples of how they can work together. We'll look at each of these pieces in more detail in the upcoming stages, but next we're going to take a deeper look at the concept of two-way data binding and the interface between models and views.